Welcome to the Created Worthy podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Damrell, and I am so grateful that you're here. On this show, I talk about creative processing and how to utilize it as a skill to bring peace, joy, and freedom into our chaotic lives. I also sit down with the most incredible guests as they share their stories, many of which for the very first time. We are all created worthy. Hello, welcome to the Created Worthy podcast. Today, I am joined by Savannah Higgins, my dear friend and incredible confidant and business bestie, and we are going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to talk about processing resistance together. Savannah is not going to tell her story at this time, but we are going to talk together about processing resistance, which is honestly a little ironic that we're doing this. Not ironic. We actually talked about it and kind of planned it like 2 hours ago, but we do not have a script, which is really uncomfortable for me because when I share something in this manner about a certain topic, I like to have a script. I have ADHD. I run best with knowing exactly what I'm going to talk about so that I can stay on track. But today we only have an outline. And we're just going to have a conversation about, again, processing resistance. Savannah, thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, let's talk. Let's talk about resistance.
I'm super excited to be here with you. Let's talk about stepping out of our comfort zones because this is my first podcast recording. So yeah, there's that.
There's that too. And you're doing it. And we're like, we're going to just do it. We're going to jump into it, have a little outline. But we're going to do it and you're going to do great.
Yeah, I feel like though that our conversations when we are confiding in each other or just processing with each other how we do is our specific like personal creative processing time.
Yeah.
And I think that it just really works well when we don't have anything scripted and I just call you up or you just call me up and we're like, oh my gosh, I have this idea or I have this topic or I have this question I need to ask and see what you think about it. So I love that we can just kind of freely go into these kinds of conversations and have fun with them.
Yes, me too. I definitely love that our conversations are always like, we do have a focused conversation and we process through a subject, whether it's like in our personal lives or in our business lives, whatever the case. We've been friends for like 7 months, 8 months, 9 months.
Yeah. I mean, it's been, man, I would say, like 9 or 10 months because it's been almost like a year.
Yeah. And we've talked a lot, like all the time, which I love. And so, yeah.
And in that short amount of time, we've been through a lot.
Yes, we have. And that I think also brings us back to let's have a conversation about resistance and how it shows up. I do want to start today with just sharing my favorite quote about resistance that I heard several years ago in my favorite book, The Path Made Clear. So the quote is, the more important an activity is to your soul's evolution, the more resistance you will feel to it. And that is by Steven Pressfield, who is an author. And he shared that during an interview with Oprah. And when he said that, I was like, oh my gosh, light bulb. Maybe what I'm feeling is not conviction like I thought it was. It's resistance, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right?
No, yeah, I totally agree. And I think that kind of like what you were talking about was just that confusion or that misunderstanding sometimes of not really comprehending like, okay, there is actually a big difference here. And I'm not sure, like, I could be completely off in assuming that people will confuse the two words.
True.
But I think that a lot of times when people hear resistance and they hear conviction, they're both kind of attaching a negative feeling to those words when that's not really the case, or even not even just not attaching that negative feeling towards it, but relating them in the same category when they're two completely opposite words.
Yes. Yes. And we were talking about this earlier when we were talking about doing this episode, and we kind of came to this conclusion that we do experience both of these things, conviction and resistance. And what we talked about is that conviction is what we believe and resistance is what we experience. So just for a second, Savannah, do you want to read the definition of resistance?
Yeah, when we looked up the definition for resistance, it says the refusal to accept or comply with something, the attempt to prevent something by action or argument, and armed or violent opposition, which also I feel like what wasn't added in this specific definition here was also kind of like resistance in terms of like physical resistance, kind of like thinking of in terms of when you're working out and you're using a resistance band and you're pulling against it, like just that actual physical resistance.
The motion of resistance. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're doing that, you're actually strengthening your body.
Your muscles, which is a positive thing. Yeah.
Yes. That is a perfect definition, like a physical picture. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
We also looked up the definition of conviction, which is a firmly held belief or opinion, or the quality of showing that one is firmly convinced of what one believes or says. So that's why we came to this conclusion that conviction is what we believe, resistance is what we experience. So thinking back with these definitions in mind, Savannah, can you describe a time in your life where you leaned into resistance and it was a good thing?
You know, I was totally going to try and be prepared for this question. And I wasn't. But
that's okay.
I mean, I can think on it. You know, describe a time in your life where you leaned into it. So leaning into it, man, that's hard. It's hard because you want to automatically think that you are experiencing resistance because it's something that you should push against. And in terms of growing stronger, yes, you do kind of push against that resistance, but like resistance itself or the outcome of that resistance in the end could be for the better, and usually is for the better. Personally, like I think it's also a roller coaster kind of thing, you know, where like you're always going to have periods of time in your life where you're having resistance, and there's always going to be periods of time where it's not so hard.
The season,
whether I'm choosing to lean into it, I mean, I would say that that's a hard thing to really try and be intentional about.
For sure. I think I can give you an example of this in your life. And this is simple. I think it's something that everyone will be able to relate to, but you have resistance about going to the gym. You experience resistance about going to the gym. I do too. Why is that? I don't really honestly know. But when you do it, you get stronger, you feel better, your mental health is better. There's all of these other things that come with that action of leaning into resistance. And that's just a really simple like example, but I think that
I know exactly what that is. I'm just not a morning person. But I'm also not a heat person either. And it gets really hot. And so nobody wants to work out when it's really hot at the end of the day either. So there's that, there's me pushing through that resistance, or, you know, pushing back on that resistance of not wanting to go in the mornings. But like, I know I need to go just because it makes me feel better the rest of my day.
Right. Exactly. So I would say for me, a time where I've leaned into resistance would probably just be, I hate to admit this. Okay. This is embarrassing. I am not the most tidy person. Let's say that. I struggle to keep up on the basic tasks of just tidying up. I will say I have done better the last few weeks, but our house definitely needs a good hour or two pickup session before, so it doesn't continue to get worse. But I'm a piles person. I put things in piles and I leave them there for months at a time until I feel mentally capable enough to find a home for the things in those piles.
You're not alone.
Well, thank you. I feel so much resistance every time I look at that pile or any pile. I'm like, nope, I am checked out. There is no possible way I can go over there. But the second that I make the decision to actually do it, and then seeing that clear space on the floor or wherever, I immediately feel like I did something. I did something that was hard. I know it's simple, but it was hard for me. And I got through it, and I truly feel better. I have more clarity. Your house, it's like scientifically proven that if you keep your house more cleanly and you keep your business space or your car or whatever more organized, then you have more space in your life to live your life and
Yeah,
to
I
feel more
totally,
joy.
I totally always say that, like, if you are constantly always keeping things up kept, then it's easier to keep things clean. Like, you know, you
Right.
keep things clean and it's easier to keep it clean.
Yeah, like you were saying earlier, both words do naturally kind of have this negative connotation, but we often misunderstand what the actual action or meaning behind that specific word is, and how we can actually utilize the knowledge of understanding these things as separate things to benefit us and to process through our resistance so that we can get to the other side of that task or hard thing that you're being called into or thing you're going to write, whatever it is, you can lean into that resistance and then get the benefit of it. So when it comes to the difference between resistance and conviction, I talked to one of my mentors today as well, and she was sharing that we often experience resistance as like a pushback or like lacking in openness. It often comes up when we're being set against someone. So like if we're dealing with a conflict per se, or a new idea comes up and we're being called potentially to act on it, but we're trying to decipher, is this something that's right for me now? Is this conviction? Is this something that's just not right for me? Or is it resistance and something that we need to lean into? So this is a clear difference between resistance and conviction, and how separately they are not negative at all.
Danielle, did you experience that, like, confusion between the two words yourself? Like, were there times that you felt like you were leaning into your convictions, or like times where you felt like you were pushing against resistance in positive or negative ways, or like the right or wrong ways?
Oh, 100%. Like, especially in this current season of life where I just have a lot of decisions to make about what I need to do and what direction I need to go. Slash, there's a lot of other things that are outside of my control. So things like even going through infertility treatments, I've felt resistance to, and there's been a reason behind it. Now, to say whether it was like maybe actually conviction and like a warning, I don't know. There's always those like gray areas, right? Sometimes you lean into something that is resistance and it doesn't always end up positive. Like there's not always a positive outcome. And I think that's actually really important to talk about, because that's just the reality of life in general. Sometimes we make steps that don't at all lead to where we thought they would go, and it results in pain and confusion. And that's where you have to go do other things to process those feelings. But
Do you feel like those times of resistance, do they like affect your convictions and your beliefs?
I think maybe sometimes it depends.
Or do you think like maybe vice versa, like that your beliefs are what is maybe like getting you through that resistance?
Yes, absolutely. I don't know why I said it like that, but yes, 100%. Because I don't think I could do any of the things that I've done, even just like in healing steps, like going to therapy and stuff like that, if I didn't have a faith that was informing my convictions and how I experienced resistance.
So you would have to have
Yeah.
those convictions as part of your belief system, as your core, as who you are, in order to be able to get through that resistance. And I think like you were kind of
Yes.
getting around to saying was like it goes hand in hand. And that's why those two words get so confused, but like it's kind of a process, right?
Yes. No, that is so true. I think that is another thing, is like you have to be willing to put in the work to figure out what are your convictions.
Right.
Because that is where you'll be able to decipher and discern, is this actually resistance or is this conviction? And if you don't have convictions, how can you decipher that? You're just going to constantly be like, I'm just taking risks. I'm just taking risks.
You're just taking those hits as they come, right?
Yeah. And like, why continue taking risks if you don't have something to inform the direction in which you're being called to?
Which is that belief and that conviction.
Oh my gosh. Mind blown. This is incredible. 100. Yes.
Mic drop.
Just saying. Mic drop moment. Boom. Okay. So how do we begin to process resistance? I have come up with 5 ways that I think can help. Now, are these the only 5 ways? Absolutely not. There's probably a billion more. Also, we are all different. So some of these might help you, some might not. The first way that we can begin to process resistance is to search your heart and intentions, which is exactly what Savannah was saying. You have to know your convictions. You have to be able to go inward, do the heart work, figure out, what is my intention? Does this thing that I'm feeling resistance to line up with my intention? If it does, then are you being called into something that could potentially grow you? If the answer is yes, then that's probably resistance.
So the second one that we are recommending might help is listening to your body. A lot of times our bodies will tell us something, and it might be against our convictions, our beliefs, who we are at a core and what we believe. Sometimes you might even have like physical symptoms to that. I know that Danielle, she gets nauseous sometimes.
Yeah, I do. I'm like, this is wrong. This is wrong.
Or you may just like have that tick in your spirit where you know that there's something bothering you, but you're not exactly sure. And it comes back, inherently, and it's just something that's not right. It doesn't feel right. Or it might be that it's just not the right time for right now, or even altogether. So listening to your body in ways that's more than just that surface level physical feeling of like feeling tired and, not wanting to be motivated to do things. Those are kind of surface level things, but like also thinking about, your spirit and how you're feeling on the inside and your emotions, and like just checking in with yourself.
Yes. Listen to your body. That's like a basic to processing anything, because your body tells you a lot of things all the time. I'm not great at listening to my body, but I am better about listening to my nausea. Okay. So the third way that you can begin to process resistance is to not immediately listen to your anxiety, feel, or initial feelings about something. Resistance often shows up at the beginning as a feeling. You're just like thinking about something, or a feeling or a thought, really, because you can be thinking about something and be like, whoa, that's a really good idea. That could serve a lot of people, or that could really help get my family to that next level. But then it's often combated with all of the what ifs and why you can't do that and all of these things. And so when you just immediately lean into your anxiety or your fear, you'll just give up. We all do it. There are things I think that we want to do that we don't do. And some of those things might be things that we're called into, but that's exactly why it's so important to not just listen to your feelings all the time. Okay, you can process your feelings 100%, because usually a feeling or an emotion is pointing to something deeper. But to immediately just be like, oh, I want to write this book, but I couldn't do that. That's not possible. Like, I'm never going to be an author. Instead of just like, maybe that isn't something for right now, but it's something that you do feel like you need to ponder because you might be being called into it. And that doesn't mean you have to immediately hire a publisher and an editor and all of these things. No, that means you take one step in that direction to see if that is something that you need to continue to lean into. So
I'm my own worst enemy sometimes when it comes to that, or my own worst critic anyways.
Me too. I think we all are. And the devil, I think the devil is real. And the enemy is like, chirp, 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 chirp. You're a failure. You're never going to do anything in your life. You should just cry in bed all day. Like,
is that how he sounds?
Yes, that's exactly how he sounds. He's got a very annoying voice. Okay. So yeah, the third way to begin to process resistance is to just not immediately listen to those feelings.
Lean into them.
Lean into them. All right, Savannah, take it.
Spend intentional time processing through exactly what you're resisting, like really spend that time processing that resistance. And kind of playing off of number 3 was, not just immediately taking action on those first initial thoughts that come to you, and really taking time and taking a step back to lean into it and spend time intentionally processing it and really understanding why you're experiencing it. Is it for you? Is it against you? And what specific actions are you feeling resistance towards? So you can spend time asking yourself that too.
Yes. So number 4 is to spend intentional time processing through what you're feeling, what you're exactly feeling resistance towards, what specific action in your life or letter that you may need to write or phone call that you may need to have or career change that you may need to do. What specific action are you feeling resistance towards? So that's number 4. The last one, and I think the most important one, is to ask the Lord or your higher power to direct the right steps and give you the courage to step into discomfort. It's hard, and sometimes we don't have the strength within us. Like me being brutally honest right now, sometimes I do not have the strength within me to just do the next thing. I need something to fill my cup so that I can continue pouring out and doing the things that I'm called to do in life. And that's where spending time with the Lord for me is what I do. Yesterday, I spent so much time in a worship session, and then I forced myself to journal, which was another thing I feel resistance to often, is reading the Bible, to be completely honest, and to journal, like pen to paper, not typing, engaging that part of my mind, journaling, searching my innermost thoughts and feelings. That is really hard for me. So I often start out that time with like, Lord, give me the desire. I actually I did a new scroll lettering project on our wall last week. And it was a quote from a podcast I was listening to called the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. And the speaker on there was talking about this prayer that she prays with her family every night. And I'm going to try to recite it, but it's a little confusing, so I might mess up. But it's, Lord, give me the desire to desire the desires you desire for me to desire. And I know that's desire, and there's a way simpler way to say that, but just saying that out loud to me is a powerful action towards being like, okay, Lord, I know that I am not spending enough time with you. I need you to give me that desire so that I can fulfill the desires of my heart that you have for me. So that is the 5th way to begin to process resistance. But yeah, Savannah, do you have anything else to add to this topic?
No, I mean, like, other than the fact that you processed through resistance just to be able to do this episode without it being scripted. And
yes, oh
that's
my gosh,
amazing.
We did it. I know.
And I think you did great.
So
and I loved it. And I think we had fun talking. And I think that's what, is going to be pretty relatable, is that we got through something today that we both were kind of probably resisting.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And that was an amazing conversation. I really hope that this resonates with other people too. But even if not, like, it resonated with me, and I think with you too. And that's enough. So
yeah.
Thank you for having this conversation.
Thank you for having me. I was excited to be a part of something of yours because I love you so much.
I love you too. You did something big by pushing into resistance and being on a podcast for the first time, and you did incredible. So I'm super proud of you. I'm so grateful for you. And we're going to have you back on the Created Worthy podcast soon. Maybe we should do more of these. Savannah is a perfect example of a guest who I've told her multiple times she is welcome to come on Created Worthy and tell her story. And she's like, I'm not ready. And I love that. I love that you and I have that relationship where we can be honest about that. And I'm proud of you for doing that. One day, I do hope we can sit down, but this is not the season, and I respect that. And so in the meantime, we should have more conversations like this. This was amazing.
Definitely. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much for listening to the Created Worthy podcast. If you want to connect more, you can follow along with me over at Danielle Damrell or Damrell Creative Co. on Instagram and Facebook. All the links to today's topics are in the show notes, and you can also find a link to my Patreon, which is where you can help support my mission on this show and keep it going. Ratings and reviews really do matter, so make sure to hook me up with 5-star review. Any less, I would rather hear your opinions over email. So anyway, if this episode resonated with you at all, share the love, send it to a friend, or post it on your social media. But don't forget to tag me so I see it and can share it too. I hope all of you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you on the flip side.